So here's the thing. Like seemingly everyone else on Twitter, I've recently become obsessed again with the Planet of the Apes trilogy. Not that I never wasn't. After all, Rise was released in 2011. I was 9. Aside from Spider-Man 3, Transformers, and Ice Age, I don't think there was a DVD I wore out more. And my parents were also pretty big proponents of that movie at the time. My dad was 14 when the original Planet of the Apes changed cinema, and my mom grew up in the perfect time to catch all of them on TV. And now I return to the Planet of the Apes. A wiser student of film, a fan of cinema, and a jaded veteran of the franchise filmmaking holy wars. A defender of mediocrity, and a believer in the potential for every IP to exceed expectations and do what they did decades ago for people like my parents and people like me, change cinema. And as I've rewatched this trilogy twice in as many weeks, I can say that Rise, Dawn, and War have elevated the Planet of the Apes to that level, and short of nothing else, have shown true strength. This is probably going to be a weird place to start, but I don't care. The Planet of the Apes has always had a strange and distinct relationship with religion. The 1968 original has some heavy, if unclear, pontifications on religion as a concept and how it influences society, which is unsurprising as the film released right as the Cold War began to wind down. The film frequently grapples with the divide and union between religion and science, and while I think it's important to the movie's identity, it's something that becomes less relevant as a thematic motif as the films go along. However, I do like what Rick Jaffa, Amanda Silver, Mark Baumbach, and Matt Reeves brought to the trilogy when using religion for the purposes of literary allegory. Caesar is Moses, that's not a secret as Matt Reeves literally intended it. An adopted son of a kind of royalty who bears the whip for his people and delivers them from slavery to a promised land that he cannot enter but dies within sight of. But in addition to that, Caesar is a bit of a Christ allegory. Literally crucified in war, his attic window becoming a representative symbol not unlike the cross, and not dying for his own people's sins, but humanity's all the same. The Colonel very much makes himself a godlike figure, worshipped by his cult as a savior of humanity, and somewhat priding himself in the strength it took to sacrifice his only begotten son. Koba, in an odd way, is that Lucifer figure, a brother of Christ but a fallen angel embodying the antithetical values, and he most definitely looks like a demon. And there's definitely something to be said of how the villains in this series can represent another familiar biblical archetype that's common in fiction. Koba enacting conquest out of fear of becoming the conquered, Dreyfus and his fear of famine brought on by lack of power, the Colonel the truest distillation of the war that Caesar fights in, and Caesar himself, driven by death to cause further death, even against his own code, and that drive ultimately brings him to his own death. These four characters ultimately bring about humanity's true apocalypse, acting as the Four Horsemen. But hey, that's just me and my harebrained cockamamie theological analysis of the monkey movies. Let's go to something more tangible, like the war itself. I've always found it interesting that War for the Planet of the Apes isn't a war movie, as it was marketed. There's certainly a way to make that interesting to do the big bombastic finale, but I really respect the decision to do a quieter piece, a character-focused drama at heart with the scale and feel of a biblical epic. However, one thing I love about Dawn is that in many ways it feels like that proper war film. Not in the sense of being a big action movie, although it does have the best and most action of the trilogy, but in the sense that in building to the massive war between humans and apes, it gives us all of the ideological conflicts you expect from a war film of this kind. One that depicts neither side as right or wrong, good or evil, but as people fighting to survive. Caesar and Dreyfus both aiming to lead their people to survival and prosperity, with a slight fear of the loss that war would bring about. Koba and Carver, the straws who break the camel's back, the extremists taking extreme actions because they cannot let go of fear, hate, and prejudice. Blue Eyes, the confused youngster, upset with the system but unable to find an alternative that suits him, turns to that extremist who twists this broken youth into a tool of destruction. Malcolm and his family, the normal people, those trying to do their part and balance it with protecting the most important people in their lives. Every side of the conflict is represented here, from the most important of leaders to the most vulnerable of victims, and they never forget to make everyone involved feel like real people. And the amazing thing is that the most real person, the most developed from the beginning all the way to the end, the most human, isn't even human. He's an ape. I haven't spoken much about Rise of the Planet of the Apes so far, but I think it's important to do so now. My hot take is that while it isn't the one that displays Circus at the peak of his performance with this character, nor is it the one where Caesar is the most compelling, it's the one that gave us the most to be invested in, and the one that built up the believability of character that carries the franchise forward. Seeing Caesar from birth, seeing his internal struggles with self-identity, empathy, and revolution by way of evolution, these are the foundations that allow us to root not just for him, but for the rise of the apes as a whole. And my favorite thing about Caesar is his strength of character, his ability to make hard choices and stick to them. But humanity and personhood is also flaws and darkness, and we see so very much of that in his rage, his imperfect calls, and his biases. I love that we see Caesar as someone born into what is essentially a subjugated underclass, but into privilege, and how once he's brought down to the level of his fellow apes, he chooses not to return to the life he once had and leave his kind on the floor, but to bring them all up with him to a status beyond their norm. The greatest thing about that, in my opinion, is how that reflects on us. All it takes is for those born into a community that has less to rise up, take the tools they have and work collaboratively, show support. Koba shows us this mentality that, while understandable, is wrong. The mentality that a community's strength comes from outward power, from violence, from the ability to do harm to those who have harmed us. Caesar shows that it is resilience, perseverance, and community that matters. That is the true strength of the Planet of the Apes. Apes, together, strong. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you like this one, please consider checking out the rest of my content, as well as liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to see more. As always, gotta thank the patrons on screen, as well as the following $10 tier patrons: Gebrick Phi, Did You Get It Guy, and Spark Plasma. If you feel so compelled, consider joining them to see your name on screen, get access to exclusive videos, and early access to the rest of my content, and overall just support the channel so I can put even more effort into awesome videos like this one. Thanks everyone!